Hi, I'm John Little, and this is the ShockCast for Saturday, August 8th, 2018. And this week, it's making peace with madness. And I didn't quite understand the double entendre that we had in that title when I chose it, but I like the title anyway. Our world is doomed. I know that this is not something that you want to accept, and I'm with you on this one, but it doesn't change the fact that everyone around us is growing more and more insane by the day. And we need to accept this fact. I struggle with this a lot, and I know that you do too. You wouldn't be a child of God if you weren't grieved by the wickedness and madness that surrounds you. So how do we keep the peace of God while the world falls apart? And we're going to need to if we truly desire to serve God in the midst of the coming darkness. For someone who spends so much time thinking, I am surprisingly emotional. And I'm not completely certain where this emotionalism comes from. I know why I get upset, and I know what makes me upset. I'm just not sure that all the reasons for that are as spiritual as I like to think. Part of the reason comes from the fact that I accepted Christ at a very young age, and I love to joke that God saved me from a life of sex and drugs. And then when I was 6, I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior. I know. You're wondering how I can know that I really was saved at such a young age. All that I can say now is that I have distinct memories of that moment and the reasons why I wanted to be baptized. And they were exactly the kinds of reasons that you want to see in anyone who chooses to follow Christ. I would be happy to get into all of that, but I don't want to get distracted from what I'm trying to say here. What am I trying to say? I get really upset when the innocent and vulnerable are hurt by the evil and malicious. And since I was saved at a very young age, it's hard for me to claim that my reaction to wickedness and depravity is completely righteous. Some of it might just be my fleshly mind reacting to the outrageous, and we all need to understand the difference. And I would like to add here, I did not have the experience of coming to Christ as an adult and going through that exceptional change that an adult can see. I was a child. It's a little hard to tell how much of what I am feeling now it's just the source of all this. But let's move on. It's natural to be outraged by injustice. If you need proof, just look at the antics of the morons on college campuses. The injustice that they are fighting against is a lie, but their response is natural. So we are all hardwired to react with anger at those who mistreat others. At least I hope so for you. To put it another way, anger at injustice is a part of our DNA. It's what God put inside of us when He made us. In fact, it's a good thing if used correctly. This verse speaks to that need. Quote, "Be ye angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath." Close quote. Ephesians 4:26. Paul is telling us that we are supposed to get angry when people do evil. But we are not to allow our righteous anger to overcome our spiritual judgment. We are not allowed to commit sin in response to our wrath. It is legitimate in the eyes of God to desire the destruction of all that is evil. After all, God feels the same way, and one day He will return and destroy the evil that is driving us nuts. What is not legitimate is to take matters into our own hands and sin against God. I would dearly love to be given the baseball bat of holiness and flail away at the evils of this world. And there are 2 verses in the Bible that describe how some of us will do just that. Quote, "And Enoch also, the 7th from Adam, prophesied of these, saying, Behold, the Lord cometh with 10,000s of his saints, to execute judgment upon all, and to convince all that are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds which they have ungodly committed, and of all their hard speeches which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." Close quote. Jude, verses 14 and 15. Will I be there with my baseball bat of holiness? Is there a perfectly shaped piece of wood in heaven in a case with the words, reserved for John Little? I would love to think so, but that's in God's hands. And as much as I would love to dwell on such righteous judgment, I know that there is something far more important. Love. As much as I despise wickedness, evil, and injustice, I need to remind myself that I am not better than the ones that I am angry at. I'm not any better than the morons that I talk about in the moron section. In fact, we are all vulnerable to becoming both evil and stupid. If you are old enough, you will know precious brothers and sisters in Christ who took that path and were utterly destroyed. I shudder whenever I think of those that have forsaken Christ while they live. There is still hope for them, some, but not much. But God is merciful, so I will hold on to hope as much as I can. If you think that you cannot fall, think again. Now, if that's true for you and me, then it means that the fools that we rage against aren't really any different than ourselves. In fact, Peter warns us of this here. Quote, "Yet therefore, beloved, seeing ye know these things before, beware lest ye also, being led away with the error of the wicked, fall from your own steadfastness." Close quote. 2 Peter 3, verse 17. And if you think that you cannot fall, allow me to point out a couple of verses. In fact, I will let you do the searching. It's in BibleGateway.com, and the search term that you should look for is Book of Life. You really can be blotted out of the Book of Life. And yes, the word blot in one of those verses means, in fact, actually both of those verses, means erase. You really can be erased from the Book of Life. That's going to be a shock to some of you, so I hope that you were sitting down when you heard that. It's very sobering, right? I don't want to deal with that issue here, except to point out, quote, "There but for the grace of God go I," close quote, and that's from John Bradford. I need to keep telling myself this or risk going stark raving mad. In fact, I need to do more than just tell myself this. I need to identify with the very same people that are driving me nuts. I need to see how I really could be that stupid, that sinful, that crazy. Too often we think of evil as being supernatural, but it really isn't. Yes, Satan and his minions are doing their very best to make all of us as evil as he is. But Satan really is only a small part of this. We are plenty evil all by ourselves, without supernatural help. It really is natural to be evil. And when the Antichrist arrives, it will be natural for everyone except the truly saved to follow him. I am horrified by this thought, and you should be too. We are all vulnerable to the seduction of evil, all of us. And yes, I'm looking at you. Then if that is so, doesn't it mean that we should have compassion for those who are vile and despicable? Definitely. Let me go back to that verse that I quoted. Quote, "Be ye angry, and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath." Ephesians 4:26. I've got the first part down perfectly. I'm furious at evil, and being furious at evil is not a sin. But that second part, what does it mean to not let the sun go down upon your wrath? Well, we could go on and on about that, but it's wrapped up in one word: forgive. And that, my friends, is a truly difficult and painful word. And it means that no matter how justified we are in being angry, we must still forgive those who are so evil. And especially if our anger is not about those who are evil. But anyway, and I'm afraid that this means identifying with those who we are so mad at. Yes, identifying. Jesus did it. It's what he did when he came down to earth and took upon himself the likeness of human flesh. He became fully human and identified himself with us so that he could save us from our sins. So we should do the same, right? Of course. Of course, also that doesn't mean that we should become sinful people that we are angry with. But it does mean that we should understand how we could stand in their shoes. If you don't do this, one of two things will happen. You will become useless to God. Or God will drag you through the mud of sin until you figure this out. That's right. God will sometimes send you back into the darkness of sin until you learn that you are as bad as anyone else. It's either that or become a useless tool that God will need to place back on the shelf, and I don't think anyone wants to be that. The key to staying sane in the midst of all of this madness is forgiveness. And as the madness increases, you will be challenged to forgive more and more and more. And you will wonder if there is any end to what you must forgive. And forgiveness is so very, very hard. But the alternative is too awful to even think about. So I shall do my very best to leave my baseball bat of holiness in heaven, where it belongs. Then I shall keep reminding myself. But for the grace of God, there go I. Now we get to the next important part of the ShockCast, the news and analysis from the past week. But before going on, take a moment to click the subscribe button below, and that's right down there. And hit that bell to be notified when the next ShockCast happens. Those of you listening via MP3, make sure that you are subscribed to the Shock Letter at theshockletter.com. And there's an important reason to be subscribed to the Shock Letter, since I usually do not have the time to talk about more than just a fraction of the news that I analyze here on the ShockCast. So subscribe to the Shock Letter and get all the news and links that I analyze for free. In fact, everyone should sign up for the Shock Letter. Subscribing and unsubscribing is easy, and there's no way that I would ever share the subscription list with anyone. Period. I'm not in this for the money and never will be. Believe me, I can make more money elsewhere. So the first bit of analysis drove me nuts. Talk about trying to apply what we just talked about. It's titled, Family's $500,000 Inheritance Seized by U.S. Border Officials, CBC News. The dirt bags, or at least those who are dirt bags, of the United States government seized bank drafts that were being sent to beneficiaries of a will. And one of those beneficiaries needed the money to pay for medical bills. The person was dying unless those medical bills were paid. But the evil government workers in Indianapolis, of all places, claimed that the bank drafts are counterfeit. What? It's just incredible. And that they would have to, and all that they would have to do is call the bank. But no, these scumbags have been sitting on this money for a year while one of the beneficiaries is suffering and dying. Where's my baseball bat of holiness and permission from God to use it? The U.S. government, sorry, U.S. Bank, well, that too. But the U.S. government is a thief and a liar. I have experienced this myself, and I won't go into the details, but thief and a liar, yeah. And I am completely and utterly disgusted. How dare they do this? Okay, but next to something a bit more lighthearted, but also quite serious. And I'm not sure that I'll be able to keep my composure as well as David Wood did. It's called Farting on YouTube, Silent but Deadly Sharia Compliance. Okay, this is an extremely serious issue about censorship over criticism of Islam. However, it's also David Wood doing fart jokes with an incredibly straight face. I can't even talk about this in keeping a straight face. I'm sorry, but I howled. I mean, I was uncontrollable. Giggles, snorting, paroxysm. paroxysms of laughter. I did it all, and that gave me a bit of asthma. And I don't normally like fart jokes. But he was making fun of YouTube, and it was pretty serious at the same time. So maybe all of that juxtapositionness, if that's a word, is what made it so funny for me. If you don't think that it was funny, that's okay. Mrs. Little wasn't sure why I thought that it was funny either. It's just more proof that men, no matter how old, are just little boys inside. Fart jokes. Seriously. Okay, next one is artificial intelligence immune to fear or favor is helping to make China's foreign policy. And this is from South China Morning Post. Being able to model human behavior is a huge step towards simulating human behavior. The fact that China is taking this step means that we are very close to that moment in time when the second beast will give life to the image that everyone will be required to worship. Here's the relevant passage from Revelation, starting in verse 11 of chapter 13, yes. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And then dropping down to verse 15. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Close quote. Revelation 13:11 and verses 15, 16, 17, and 18. And okay, I believe that this image is an artificial intelligence running on a computer. I'm not dogmatic on this, but that's what makes the most sense to me. And the fact that the Chinese are taking steps to include an AI in their decision-making process about foreign policy, well, it's just a little chilling. After all, analyzing foreign policy requires an understanding of how humans act. And understanding how humans act, well, that's a pretty big and pretty good way to get started on reproducing or making something look awfully lot like a human being, or at least act like one. Moving on, national disgrace. UK rejects Syrian Christians, refugee intake 100% Muslim. Here's another snapshot of just how awful the British government has become. They have flooded their country with Muslims and rejected the only legitimate refugees, the Christians. I am sickened by this kind of evil, and I'm not sure how much more of this I can take until I need to shut down out of sheer nausea or start waving around that baseball bat of holiness. The British government is just as horrifying as the American government, but just more obvious. And you'll see in a couple of articles down in this list, as we talk about it, what Tommy Robinson went through. That is another indication of just how horrible and awful and shocking the British government has become. But this next one is exceptional. It's called I Survived Demons of the New Age from YouTube. I always get a spiritual boost to hear the testimonies of people and how they came to Christ. Not everyone has a spectacular salvation story. I certainly didn't myself. And each story has a different life application. And I have one of those. This one warns of the dangers of the New Age, and I do not think that it is possible to emphasize enough the dangers of the terrible, horrific, occult practices that are creeping into our churches. This woman did not realize what she was getting into herself when she fell into these doctrines of demons. But God rescued her and made her whole again. Unfortunately, it sometimes takes an awful experience to pull you out of the quicksand, and I've had my own quicksand experience. And I suspect that you have as well. So if you have an hour to listen to Elise as she describes her life as a deeply demonic New Age practitioner, I highly recommend that you take this opportunity. The next one is top U.S. shale oil fields decline rate reaches new record. 500,000 barrels per day. From SRS Rocco Report. If you think that the shale oil revolution is going to solve the problem of peak oil, you really must think again. Shale has been a failure, and it is still a failure, and it will continue to be a failure no matter how much money you throw at this industry. Now I know that we've had a few recent discoveries, and those new discoveries will help us a little bit in terms of mitigating what's coming. But please, please, do the math. And if you can't do the math, at least look at the real facts of what's really happening. Shale oil is not going to save us from what's coming. Peak oil is already here. And when it hits us, when the reality of peak oil hits us, it's going to be bad. Death and destruction on a global scale. But moving on. Devin Nunes just saw the FISA warrant, YouTube. And this is actually a Bill Still video. This is extremely serious. We have an honorable man, someone that I've actually talked about in another case, really interesting, from California, talking about the water issues and how the socialists in California have destroyed California's ability to send water, to store water, and to make sure that her own people get water. The droughts that California has had is directly because the stupid, moronic, idiotic, socialist government of California has destroyed their own water system. But here Devin Nunes talks about something completely different and far more serious. We have an honorable man testifying that there is nothing that would compromise the security of the U.S., yet they have denied access to that, to what we see in that FISA warrant. They have redacted, they have deleted, or they have covered over information that is not of a serious security issue, just so that they can keep you from knowing the truth about what the FBI and the Department of Justice has been doing. We're talking corruption at a colossal scale. How dare they do this? May God help Devin Nunes as he tries to uncover what those foul fiends from hell have been doing. And I have a question to ask. Why hasn't President Trump declassified all of this? It needs to be done. So please, Mr. Trump, do it now. Now this next one is Twitter's statement about how they don't shadow ban kinda sounds like they shadow ban, from the Washington Free Beacon. I know that I speak for you all when I say that hypocrisy is just so lovely. It's such a wonderful, wonderful thing. Why we should all become hypocrites. Okay, I'll stop. I just don't understand how people can act in this way without a shred of integrity or honor. But that is what America is becoming, a nation without a shred of integrity or honor. Yes, those of you in the U.S. who are reading this or watching me are an exception to this trend. But I've seen more and more and more Americans act in a way that is so obscene that I do not have words to express my shock, outrage, and revulsion. In fact, actually, the shock, outrage, and revulsion is part of the reason why I'm here in Taiwan. When I was sitting in our apartment in Jerusalem, contemplating where we go next, I just could not go back to America. So I decided to see what God would have for us here in Taiwan. And thankfully, God did have things for us here in Taiwan, and I'm glad that I'm here. Thank God that I'm here in Taiwan, not having to deal directly with this horrifying mess in America. Remember, Twitter is awful and evil, but they're just a symptom, not the cause. This next one, wow. New York Times stands by new tech writer Sarah Jeong after racist tweets surface from Fox News. So not only does the New York Times know about this foul female, they are supporting her. Why am I not surprised? My hope is that none of you have a subscription to the New York Times. No one should support such an evil institution or allow such people to manage the information that you are receiving. After all, I was in Jerusalem while the New York Times was lying about what was going on in Jerusalem and the rest of Israel. Anyway, I think that it was Mark Twain who said, if you don't read your newspaper, you are uninformed. If you read your newspaper, you are misinformed. Truth. This next section gets into the Tommy Robinson arrest and release. What the UK did to Tommy Robinson is sick and twisted. He did not break the law in any way, and his summary imprisonment is a vile and evil act of a psychopathic judge and a psychopathic government. More importantly, it's a symbol and a symptom of what is happening, first in the UK and then elsewhere. Welcome to the pathological, psychopathic, diabolical Islamization of your country, wherever you are. This next one is revealed Tommy Robinson's shocking prison treatment from Ezra Levant on YouTube. Why was Tommy Robinson allowed to be mistreated in prison like this? Why is the prison system in the UK allowed to be used as a system of torture for prisoners of conscience like Tommy Robinson? If you live in the UK, think about living somewhere else, if you can. Then Tommy Robinson speaks for the first time since release from jail and says time behind bars amounted to mental torture. And this one is from the Mirror online. What they did to Tommy was a despicable evil. It was obscene. And it's a sad day for Britain that this was allowed to happen. And the judge that did this will probably suffer no ill effects for his horrendous crime. And to call Tommy Robinson far right is utterly insane. Tommy is no more far right than I am. All that I can say is, think about leaving Britain if that's where you live. And I will keep repeating this, well, as long as I can. And then this one, vindication. Ezra Levant on judges Tommy Robinson ruling in depth. This is an excellent blow-by-blow analysis of this hearing of Tommy's appeal. What an absolute vindication of Tommy. Well done, Ezra Levant, for reporting this, and well done, Tommy Robinson, for standing up and not giving up. Tommy was a true political prisoner. On this ruling alone, Jeffrey Marson, the judge who put Tommy in jail, the psychopath, the disgusting piece of work who did this, well, he should be sacked with prejudice. Then there's this one, exclusive interview. Tommy Robinson tells Ezra Levant about prison treatment. This is an even longer interview with Tommy. What they did to him when they sent him to prison was an abomination. And you can see what happened to Tommy just by looking and watching Tommy talk. How dare the British government do this to Tommy? How dare they? This is something that you would expect in some third world dungeon. No, worse than that. In a third world dungeon, they probably aren't going to assign Muslim prisoners to cook your food, knowing that the Muslim cook would poison you. I just do not have words to describe how evil this is. Whatever opposition that someone might have had, to do this to Tommy is beyond comprehension. The UK is lost. Abandoned ship. Okay, let's move on to corruption and the military takeover to solve it in the US. What is going on with Hillary and the corruption being revealed in Washington is so huge that I doubt that it's possible to emphasize enough the seriousness of this situation. I believe that these revelations will eventually take down the Republic and replace the current government with one ruled by the generals. And please, do not discount this. Corruption is always how republics and kingdoms fall, and how the military takes over. This will make the French Revolution look like a simple colonic from Zero Hedge. I love James Howard Kunstler's work. He's an excellent observer of the foolish and stupid, and he doesn't lie to himself that we are all smart enough to avoid the catastrophe that awaits all of us. He knows what's coming, and he's not afraid to point it out. Now, if he would just name his blog something other than Cluster F Nation, and you know what the F stands for, I would appreciate it. It might allow me to directly link to his articles. But here are a couple paragraphs from his excellent article. Quote, "Nobody in that group of rogue FBI agents and their Department of Justice enablers has had to answer for any of this, especially those whose misdeeds have been identified in detail by the DOJ's own Inspector General. Am I the only one in the country wondering why they have not been called to a grand jury? That is generally how the rule of law works when evidence of criminal misbehavior comes to light, and a formal inquiry must determine whether indictments are warranted. You'd think the New York Times or the WASHPO would want to ask Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein why he has not assigned a federal prosecutor to walk these cases into grand juries. What is he waiting for? What are the papers waiting for?" Then this next paragraph. "Nobody can say where all this is tending, but if we do not stumble into some version of World War III before Christmas, I foresee a drawn-out, bloody house-cleaning in American leadership that will make the French Revolution look like a simple civic colonic." Close quote. And that is what I'm afraid of. Do you understand what the French Revolution was like? It was awful. There was blood in the streets. Heads rolled. Millions of people were killed, murdered in their beds, murdered. Well, it was awful, beyond description. You don't want a French Revolution. Trust me on this one. Then there's this one, and to me, Gog and Magog will mark really the biggest turning point into the last days. I really believe that Gog and Magog is going to come long before the Antichrist comes. In fact, I believe that it will be the Gog and Magog that will usher in the conditions that will set the stage for that coming of the Antichrist. And I've been writing about the coming of Gog and Magog for a while. You can find a lot of that in Ezekiel'sFire.com. And the articles that I will talk about below point to that coming. I really, really, really hope that you'll be ready for this. Please read Ezekiel's Fire to make sure. And yes, it is free. And this one, Turkey will stand up to U.S. in face of sanctions threat over American ambassador. I'm glad that the excuse being given is about an American pastor doing evangelism in the Kurdish areas of Turkey. Remember that Turkey has never paid the price for the genocide of 2 or 2.5 million Christians 100 years ago. Their blood still stains the soil of Turkey, and it will require either confession and repentance or the destruction of Turkey to clean away that stain. Want to bet which choice Turkey has made? Right. Here comes Gog and Magog. And I actually believe that the coming of Gog and Magog will be a part. Well, maybe I should say it this way. The evil that Turkey has done will require her to be a part of Gog and Magog so that she can be judged by God for the horrifying sins that she has committed. Turkey needs to be judged. And so Turkey will join Gog and Magog and be judged. This next one is Iran guards call on President Rouhani to halt Rial's drop, from Bloomberg Quint. Oops. If the IRGC isn't happy with you, you are in a lot of trouble. That is, if you are head of the government in Iran. The Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps are the guns pointed at everyone's head. If you don't want a revolution, you need the IRGC supporting you. But it's hard to see what Rouhani can do to make life for the IRGC better. It's going to be bad, kids. This next one is Iran protests clashes with police gaining steam after week of plummeting rial from Zero Hedge. This is a pretty big deal. Protests are increasing, putting pressure on the mullahs in Tehran, and it looks like these demonstrations are growing in size and number. I suspect that Iran will be looking for a war to divert attention. Also, a nice big war will allow the government to round up the troublemakers and to conscript them into the army, where they can have an accident if they don't quiet down. It's going to be bad. Okay, this one, actually a couple things. In this one about in the Israel section, the truth about Israel's nation-state law, YouTube. This is a very good secular point. Israel is the only place in the Middle East where everyone can live together comfortably. Nowhere else in the Middle East are minorities or even majorities so safe and protected. And the reason for all of that is because the Jews run the place. However, a bigger reason would be the persecution that is suffered by Jews when anyone else is in control. Israel and the Jewish residents of Israel don't want that. So they made a law to make that happen. If you don't like Israel being ruled by the Jewish people, you need to move somewhere else. Those who moan about this law need to get a life. Then there's this one, and it's really depressing. Over 20,000 march in Jerusalem Pride Parade under heavy security. This is from the Times of Israel. I remember when these started. No one in Jerusalem wanted this march. There was a big battle to even... It took a lot of effort for the homosexual movement in Israel to actually get this to happen. It took a long time. And it's an evil thing, but everyone is powerless to stop it because Israel has laws that allow freedom of assembly and freedom of speech, as long as you are not inciting people to violence. Unfortunately, the anti-Semites will use this gay pride event to point their finger and say, "See, look at how awful the Israelis are." Don't be caught in this trap. There really are awful Israelis. If you are expecting otherwise, you are sorely mistaken. Even at the height of Israel's greatness, when Israel was closest to God, during the times of David and in the early stages of Solomon's kingdom, there was great evil in her midst. The Israel of today is not close to God, but she is getting closer as the numbers of Israeli Christians increase. And yes, there really are serious numbers of Christians in Israel, and their numbers are growing every day. Do not add your voice to those attacking Israel. Never do that. Israel's getting enough abuse already. You don't need to add your voice, or my voice, to that. Okay, that's it for this week's ShockCast. I truly hope that you'll be ready for what is coming. A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. Proverbs 22:3. If you find a flaw in my reasoning, have a question, or wish to add your own viewpoint, leave a comment on the Omega Shock website or in the comment section below. Omega Shock readers and ShockCast listeners leave awesome comments, and I value each and every one of them. Unless you're an anti-Semite, which of course you'll get deleted. Again, make sure that you are subscribed to the Shock Letter at theshockletter.com. In fact, everyone should sign up for the Shock Letter. It's free. Subscribing and unsubscribing is easy, and there's no way that I would ever share the subscription list with anyone, period. You have my promise on that. For those of you on YouTube, hit that subscription button below and click the bell to get notifications. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. All of that helps you and me get the message out. And so, allow me to practice my Hebrew and close with a blessing from Numbers 6, verses 24 to 26. Yevarecha Yehovah Yeshmirecha. Ya'er Yehovah Panav Elecha Veyichu Neka. Yisa Yehovah Panav Elecha Yisam Lacha Shalom. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face shine upon thee and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee and give thee peace. Numbers 6, 24 to 26. May your pastor give you the words that you need to hear to continue walking the path that God calls you to follow. And Lord willing, I will see all of you next week.